All right, it's 6 o'clock, so I'm going to get started. I do think we're probably expecting a few more people to have a Q&A after this, but I'm going to get started with the webinar and live stream. Thank you for joining us. My name is Tony Shawcross with the Colorado Psychedelic Practitioners Cohort. I'm here to talk about the 2025 DMT Facilitator Training Program. This webinar that we're going to give should give you a good overview of what the full program, 5-month program, is going to be like. Also trying to give you some very, very specific bits of knowledge and information that'll be useful for you, even if you don't take the training. A little thing I want to say at the beginning before we start, this is just a Venn diagram I put together clearly without any graphic designer or AI help, but the blue circle is representing everything that's happening to you on psychedelics. The little pink circle is everything that science has reliably discovered about it, and then of course, me and the people who are helping with this program only know a subset of what is known. Most of the programs to date that exist, especially around ayahuasca or DMT, spend a lot of time working in kind of like metaphysics and kind of spirituality. Um, and I've taken several of these classes, and the design of this program and of most of the work with the Colorado Psychedelic Practitioners Cohort is we encourage trainers to stay in what is really known and let participants, work through spiritual and metaphysical questions kind of on their own time. So this program will be grounded in science and scientific understanding of DMT, even in ceremonial settings, but especially in more clinical settings. So let's get into it. First question, why DMT certification? DMT was legalized in Colorado 2 years ago, just over 2 years ago now. And it's been something that I've been delving into, especially since it was legalized. I also co-own a retreat center in Costa Rica where we're in kind of a bit of a hotbed for DMT and ayahuasca work, and I've always been excited about DMT, especially in how it can support mental health. So it's really ideal for patients who are new to psychedelics. DMT has really unmatched ability to titrate the dose and control duration, both on its own or with a monoamine oxidase inhibitor. Really, no other medicine or psychedelic can have this level of time control and titration control due to its fast-acting nature. So that leads to less anxiety, less fear, often less resistance. It's really the only psychedelic-assisted therapy that can work within a standard 1 hour therapy session. It's legal in Colorado and in a growing number of locations across the world. It's safe, has very few contraindications, which we'll get into. It's non-addictive. There's not a lot of people doing it. A lot of these reasons lead to less liability. And then, yeah, for me, again, it's just been my favorite medicine. I've had some of my most healing experiences on it, and I've seen it be really powerful in therapy, even though it's a new and emerging medicine for psychedelic assisted therapy. So let's get into it. Phase one of the program, it's a 5-phase program. We're going to talk about just a basic overview of DMT and the legal status. DMT became illegal in the US through the Controlled Substances Act. Finally, it became illegal in 1971. Research resumed with Rick Strassman in the mid-90s with his studies, very well-known studies. And then Johns Hopkins, of course, revived a lot of what's now known as the psychedelic renaissance in the mid-2000s. There have been states and cities across the United States that have been legalizing or decriminalizing it for personal use. Oakland became the first in the US to decriminalize DMT back in 2019. And since then, over 20 cities have followed suit, including Santa Cruz, Cambridge and Somerville in Massachusetts, Ann Arbor, Michigan, Seattle, Washington, D.C. California, Oregon, Maine, and Vermont are moving to decriminalize statewide. Missouri is considering it specifically for therapeutic use. And nationally, it's legalized or has different levels of decriminalization in Brazil, Costa Rica, Mexico, and Peru. In this class, we'll do a full review of the law that now codifies and manages the legality of DMT in Colorado, which is Senate Bill 23290, passed in 2023. And just one little taste of what we'll go over for those that care about the legal status in Colorado is this clause defining personal use of DMT. So it both controls the amount. It doesn't give a specific amount, but it says, it's the amount that you would need to share with another person, 21 years of age of over, in the context of counseling, spiritual guidance, or beneficial community-based use and healing. You can never sell it or use it for any commercial purposes. But there's this interesting piece here that says nothing in this section precludes remuneration for bona fide support services that are used concurrently with the sharing of natural medicine. So it means you can get paid for bona fide support services while you're gifting DMT. So all DMT use now, it's not licensed or regulated in Colorado. It's all through this personal use clause. And one of the restrictions for if you're gifting DMT and being paid for any bona fide support services is that you can't be advertising the sharing of the natural medicine or the services provided. And you have to inform any individual engaging the services that you're not a licensed facilitator. So I hope that makes sense. We've been working with some of the best legal minds in Colorado that helped write Proposition 122 and draft some of the language that contributed to Senate Bill 290. Yeah, want to make sure everybody understands their legal situation. And, we're so lucky in Colorado to be here in a space where we can be pioneering this program within the limits of the law. Then we're going to get into the pharmacology of DMT. And I want you to just look at these two molecules. So this is psilocin, which is the psychoactive drug that your body converts psilocybin into. And clearly it's very similar to DMT. It has just that one kind of I think it's a methoxy group that's missing. And then it's also worth noting that they're both very similar to serotonin. It just has those two methyl groups that are missing from the serotonin molecule. So it's really no surprise that both psilocin and DMT interact with the brain in very similar ways to serotonin. Again, we don't know everything about the interaction between DMT and your brain. There's some recent evidence that is showing that there are a lot of things going on besides just this serotonin 2A receptor. But we do think the majority of the psychoactive effect of DMT comes from its interplay with this specific receptor, the 5-HT or serotonin 2A receptor. So we'll be learning more about that and that receptor and how it works. This is a graphic taken from the Spirit Pharmacist Ben Malcolm's program, which I can't recommend enough. It's probably the most affordable and biggest bang for the buck training that I've done, especially among trainings where you're not doing hands-on experimental learning with your medicines. But in this picture, this is a synapse. This is a presynaptic on the left dendrite, and then a postsynaptic, brain cell on the right. And those blue dots are serotonin molecules. The red dots are, in this case, DMT or psilocin molecules. They behave very similarly. So DMT doesn't increase the amount of serotonin in your system, which is part of the reason why it's much safer than a lot of other medicines and doesn't have much risk for serotonin syndrome. It doesn't really mess with your monoamine oxidase. It doesn't mess with your reuptake pumps. It just kind of resembles serotonin, gets into these synapses and interacts with those serotonin 2A receptors to have a slightly different signaling than the normal. This yellow blast is representing the normal serotonin signaling, and DMT does some different signaling at the brain cells. So we're trying to help people understand as much as they can about what's actually happening in your mind, in your body with DMT. Also, of course, want to go through contraindications. This is a very complex chart, but this third column over here is DMT, and it just goes to show that DMT has fewer contraindications than almost any medicine. It's right up there with LSD and mushrooms as among the safest psychedelics and safest medicines you can use. In most studies, we'll show one later, far safer than even tobacco or alcohol. And then we'll definitely talk about monoamine oxidase inhibitors. So DMT and DMT facilitation doesn't necessarily include MAOIs, but it's just important that people understand MAOIs and how they work with DMT. We'll go over the physical or pharmacological problems that can arise with MAOI use, psychological problems that might arise, and then different interventions, non-medical and medical interventions. Um, and we'll have some experiential opportunities, even in these first few weeks of class, for people to try DMT with and without MAOI in PAT sessions and to observe others in psychedelic assisted therapy sessions with DMT. Phase three is where we get much more hands-on. These first three phases can all be taken remotely, including this one. We've been teaching DMT extraction classes for 2 years now, and also teach ayahuasca preparation, both traditional ayahuasca preparation with Banisteros caapi and chacruna leaves, but also other plants that you can make either ayahuasca or pharmahuasca with like Mimosa hacillus root bark or Syrian rue. We'll go through DMT extraction, how to make freebase DMT for vaping, how to make DMT fumarates or acetates, different salts that are better for like insufflation and use in the nasal cavity where you can more easily control dosage. And then pharmahuasca preparation. So this essentially is kind of a more distilled version of ayahuasca, where you're getting the MAOIs and the DMT, but fewer of the other plant materials and alkaloids that can cause a nausea. And then again, there'll be experiential opportunities where students will have the opportunity to try different routes of administration and prepare their own medicine for any events or ceremonies that they are wanting to lead. Then phase four, we're going to go to Costa Rica for 6 days. It'll begin with a 2-day ceremony. So this program, it's important to note, this program doesn't certify you to become an ayahuasca shaman, but a lot of the kind of big names in DMT haven't even had the experience of ayahuasca, and we feel like it's really important for people who are working with DMT to understand this kind of the main traditional and historical use of DMT is through ayahuasca. And so we'll start with 2 days in an amazing space in Costa Rica, led by an expert and renowned ayahuasquero team with decades of experience in the Shipibo tradition. So we'll go up to their off-grid 1,000-acre ranch in the mountains of Costa Rica, and we'll have a ceremony with them where you'll be learning from the best in the traditional approach, but then also have a day of training with them. And they're my favorite ayahuasquerans that I've worked with ever. They have an amazing kind of feat in both traditions, both a deep understanding and reverence for the traditional ceremonial traditions, but then also kind of an understanding of Western medicine and understanding of modern psychology. So again, I'm so excited that we're going to be able to go spend 2 days there. And then 4 days at a home that I've built on a 30-acre retreat center called Casa Chacruna. The retreat center is called Cascada Elysiana. We'll have 4 days of DMT and pharmahuasca ceremonies with students assisting for 2 nights and participating in 2 nights. Then we'll come back to Denver, and participants will have an opportunity to guide a one-night ceremony just with other members of the cohort and attend one or two others here in Denver. And then we'll have a class session discussing ceremony, takeaways, feedback, and integrating best practices and subjective effects. As we move into the next phase, where we're talking about more clinical and DMT use and psychedelic assisted psychotherapy, it's really important for us to look at what aspects of the set and setting, what aspects of traditional ceremonial use you can bring into a clinical setting, because we know that it makes a huge difference for people's experience, quality of experience, to have that ceremonial setting. And there's a lot that we can learn from what more shamanistic approaches are able to do from that set and setting approach to really optimize the experience for people. So we'll also get into, before we get into the psychotherapy side, we'll talk about pitfalls of DMT facilitation, talk about projection, transference, and countertransference. We'll be able to have a deep dive into our own motivations for psychedelic facilitation, make sure that you know that this any subconscious motivators are out in the open. Practice somatic awareness, getting out of our head, go through contraindications again, any type of harm and harm reduction. And then we'll start observing these DMT assisted therapy sessions. And before we get into the fifth piece, I want to make sure that people understand, a lot of people, they've gone to a ketamine clinic or they've gone to a DMT or an ayahuasca ceremony, and they kind of have this image that like all psychedelic assisted therapy or all psychedelic facilitation is similar to their experience. But there is a real wide kind of range of trainings. And, I personally have taken trainings across this full spectrum where I've taken trainings from like Zendo project just in true like trip sitting where you're not really responsible for the set and setting for the most part. Definitely high dose. You're very non-directive, and yeah, honoring the medicine as the guide, participant led. Then, there's more ceremonial, shamanic or traditional, approaches, group clinical facilitation, individual clinical facilitation. All four of these on the left here are usually really high dose, where people are in a truly altered state of consciousness. And, that requires, a lot of, again, mindset and intention setting up front, real careful, attention to the setting itself, and then usually some integration work after the fact to help people integrate what they've learned from an altered state of consciousness into their day-to-day consciousness. Well, we're going to talk about psychedelic assisted therapy from a psycholytic level, a low dose level, which is what our training is. And I must say that despite having, many high dose ego death experiences, despite working with some of the best, traditional, shamans that I've encountered, for me, the most useful and beneficial experiences I've had on psychedelics have all been this low dose psycholytic psychotherapy, most of which done through the innate path model. So Avery's going to pull up a video where Jen, the founder of Innate Path, is going to talk a little bit about their model, which not many people are familiar with, and this low dose psycholytic assisted therapy, and how they'll apply that approach to this DMT certification program. You want to jump in, Avery? Oh, you're muted, so that video won't go either. Will you start it over and make sure you're not muted?
And other practitioners, doctors, nurses, massage therapists, musicians, anybody can take our training because we really think that having an informed community is what we need as psychedelics become more and more mainstream. So our training started with a somatic model. We brought in parts work that became very necessary. We brought in touch, attachment work, um, and uh, and the Buddhist psychology of mind. In our training, we focus on ketamine and cannabis. They're amazing medicines, and we do like lower dose sessions. So you always have like your conscious mind able to be the witness, which allows you to start growing that sense of I need to have control. Like it starts to like um instead of following fear, it starts to follow the intelligence of the subconscious. And that's where our name came from. It's an innate path. We all have an inner guide, like an inner compass. And when we train ourselves to instead of looking for what's true outside to start looking for what's true inside, then we open ourselves up to a much higher intelligence. So every medication has a different quality, like what it kind of works with. Does it work more with spirit? Does it work more with body? Does it work more with mind? Cannabis works more with body. Ketamine works more with mind. DMT works more with mind, and it can also work with body. DMT is amazing because it offers a low risk time frame, and that can be you can get an amazing amount of work done in a short period of time, especially if you know it's going to be time limited and you trust it. So anyway, our role in the training is going to be in um, teaching a model that that brings in all of these different elements so that you would have them at your disposal, you know, depending on what comes up in the session, you'll have a sense of how to hold it. So there will be theoretical um, training, and and then there will be um, stepping into the role of the client seat with the medicine. And our instructors will hold those sessions so that you can let go of your need to know and step into the receptive role of curiosity as the client and see what can happen with your own process. And that will last, I think, 8 weeks, Tony. Um, uh, and and so you'll have sessions, witness sessions, and process the sessions that you've seen of others in your own sessions together in a group. That group process is super important too. You get a variety of input from other people and what they're experiencing, which is really important, but it also gives you a sense of what it's like to be doing this healing in community and how to support each other. And it's pretty beautiful.
Cool.
Hello and welcome to the 77th annual.
Great. So, again, so Innate Path will be providing this, and their model is based on this is a summary of what she just said: embodied mindfulness and somatic processing, really modalities that have been proven to work well with psychedelic assisted therapy. A lot of parts work, which can include, you know, like IFS, updating childhood programming, include dynamic attachment repatterning, Buddhist psychology and the nature of consciousness. So a lot of this kind of exploring of how our understanding of consciousness is really a construction and an approximation of reality, and how, you know, psychedelics give us an opportunity to kind of revise that construction that we have, knowing that none of it is exactly matching reality. Resolving trauma, especially focused on dissociation. And then again, it's a psycholytic therapy. So not an approach that many people are familiar with, but in my personal experience, even having worked with like world-renowned psychologists, my best personal healing sessions in my life have been these low dose psycholytic therapy programs with people trained in this innate path model. And DMT is getting some additional traction in psychedelic assisted therapy. One study from about a decade ago of over 22,000 psychedelic users listed DMT as the drug with the highest strength of pleasure, the lowest negative effects, risk of harm, and lowest come down after use compared with LSD, psilocybin, and ketamine. There are new studies highlighting the potential therapeutic applications of DMT in mental health. It's proven to enhance neuroplasticity and emotional processing and self-reflection despite the short acting nature of it, and can aid in addressing depression and trauma and furthering psychological insights and perspectives. This is again some older studies, but just showing that, you know, even alcohol and tobacco had higher incidences of harm associated with them. DMT wasn't in this particular study, but you can so see that mushrooms, LSD were down there among the safest, and DMT is right there alongside of them. So last thing I want to say too is that this is a pilot program. This is the first time we're going to ever offer this. We've done many aspects of it, some of which is coming up this weekend on December 21st. You can participate in our DMT extraction and ayahuasca preparation class. It's a free class with lab grade kits available for people to use this weekend. And many weekends, we're also offering psychedelic assisted therapy observational opportunities where you can watch people receiving psychedelic assisted psychotherapy using this innate path model with this low dose psycholytic DMT application. And one thing I should mention that the programs in the Colorado psychedelic practitioners cohort are peer led. The whole program is an each one teach one kind of model. So while we do have a lot of experts involved in this program, we'll be learning psycholytic psychotherapy from Jen, who you just saw, and members of her team. Also, the model, especially for this pilot program, is for everyone to really participate in some way. We know that everyone has a lot to offer, and so we are looking at ways to significantly discount the pricing for every participant in exchange for them, contributing in some way. One of the things I'm most excited about is we're going to really compile all the kind of intellectual property and knowledge about this, because again, as I mentioned at the onset, a lot of the programs and training, and if you've seen this Spirit Molecule documentary or read the book, a lot of those are really kind of off in one realm of kind of spirituality and kind of metaphysics, and kind of taking some real leaps away from our kind of understanding of science and the physical world, and with good reason. There's a lot of reason I can understand why they might be doing it, but this program is much more grounded in scientific understanding and allowing members to, on their own, kind of extrapolate and kind of explore, uh, the metaphysical questions and the spiritual questions on their own. So that's it. And now we have some time for a Q&A. So Avery, if there are any questions that have come in from YouTube, or Juliana, anybody else that's watching, feel free to chime in with any questions about the program. And otherwise, I will say to those of you that are considering it, there's a link below where people can sign up for a kind of one-on-one interview and question if you're interested in getting some questions answered about the program. We'd love to talk to you and go through, any questions that you might have. The program will begin in mid-February. And again, for those that want to participate remotely, the first three phases you'll be able to participate remotely. Then we're going to spend a week together in Costa Rica, which can't be done remotely. And then during the phase 5, which is May and June 2025, people will be able to, if you're from out of town, you will be able to compress the 10 sessions that are part of that into a week or so if you want to, by both observing and participating in sessions, as well as offering them with